Thank you for joining us today's session, the part of our Global Reflection series hosted by Enstitü Sosyal, a think tank based in Istanbul, dedicated to conducting research on social, cultural, economic, and specifically education fields. This session marks the fourth guest in our Global Reflection webinar series, and we will continue to host prominent educators and social scientists every month. Today, we are honored to welcome Dr. Anne Goujon, a distinguished researcher on demography, and Dr. Goujon, who serves as a co-director of the Wittgenstein Center for Demography and Global Human Capital, and as director of the Population and Just Societies program at ISA, has made a significant contribution to understanding population dynamics and their implication for societal and environmental change. Firstly, we are going to listen Dr. Anne's research on future population dynamics and global projections, and then Q&A session is going to start. Then our participants can intervene in the session to ask their questions. Dr. Anne, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Nice being here, presenting for Enstitü Sozial. So, as mentioned, I work in Austria for an institute that is looking at population dynamics, and one of our specialty is doing population projections. And I'm going to so now it doesn't work anymore. Oh yeah, now it works. And the outline of my talk is the following. I'm going to talk about why we need projections. I'm going to place it into the story of the megatrends that we see happening at the moment. One area where we are particularly putting our attention is the impact of education and how it affects the demographic heterogeneity, and the future of population. I will present the projections that we do here at the Wittgenstein Center in my institution. And shortly at the end, I will talk about a survey that we did looking at expert opinions, demographic expert opinion on the future and how it would be. Why do we do projections? I think this must be clear to almost everyone. It's a valuable toolbox to think about implications of trends into the future, the implications that they have on the size of a population, but also on the structure. It's why do we do this also? It's because, like humans, population is important, is really relevant for all global changes, economic, environmental, societal, geopolitical, and so on. And this is strategic for policy formulation. We need it at every moment if you want to think about education in the future, number of schools or number of hospitals needed, and so on. So this is very important. Also, a distinction that I always make when I present about the projection that we do is that we do projections, meaning that we implement scenarios about the future and we look at the result, which is a bit different from forecasts. Forecasts are usually done, for instance, by Statistical Institute. I guess the Statistical Institute of Turkey does forecasts, so likely scenarios into the future, what is likely to happen. And predictions is something totally different, which we don't do. We have no way. We don't have a crystal ball that tells us what will be the future. I will skip that, how we do projections, and jump directly into what are the megatrends. And the megatrends about the future of the world population is that there are very strong demographic imbalances. So we have, on one hand, a growing global population, but unevenly across the different regions, which creates uneven population structures. We have a changing size and composition of the labor force, particularly in the global north, and increasing implication for aging. And I'm going to go a bit into this into the next few minutes. So overall, this is how the world is projected to be into the future. So the world population, total world population, this is according to the UN. This is not our projections here. And you see that according to the UN, you have a peak of the world population around 2080, 2085 at a level of 10.3 billion, and then the population declining to be about 10.2, sorry, in 2100, and the world population somehow being between 8.5 billion and 11.5 billion at the end of a century, depending on the scenario, but with a confidence interval of 95%. Why this is happening, how this world population is increasing and how is this stabilizing is explained in the demography by the demographic transition. I don't have to go into the theory too much, but this is somehow a theory that explains for mostly all countries, and there's not really an exception. You can find exceptions at times, but for all countries, basically, they've gone from a state where like death rates and birth rates were very high, and therefore the population was stabilizing at very low level, to a stage where population, the fertility, the birth rates and the death rates are quite low. And in this intermediate period, which we see here, I don't know if you see my mouse, but there is the first, it starts with the death rates declining, and the birth rates decline a bit later, which create this period of natural increase, and then going down. And then what happens in the last phase is that we would have a natural decrease, but we don't know really. And when we see what is happening in reality, so this is the theory. On the other side, on the right-hand side, you can see what is the reality, and it's clear that all countries in the world are actually going through this demographic transition, and the demographic transition makes sense. We can see where we are now in 2025. Of course, there are like quite different perspective, because not everyone started the transition at the same time. So many countries in the global north, let's say, started earlier in the 19th century, and these countries, this what you see here, the more developed regions, are at the end of their demographic transition, so that they have already entered this period of natural decrease. That's what we see here on the left-hand side. In the less developed region, then they are still in the period of quite strong natural increase, but we see that this natural increase is actually decreasing as well, and this would lead somehow towards the end of the century, middle of the century, second middle of the century, to a decline. So that's where we are, and that's where Turkey is in there, and Turkey is somehow in between these two different, what we say, more developed, less developed regions, with still some natural increase going on, but quite at the end of this increase, as we see. Somehow, according to this UN projection, then the population would reach its peak in 2050, and then start declining. So there's a lot of question, and I was a bit discussing with our host before the start of this seminar, what could be the consequences for the future. So of course, there's a dramatic way of thinking that there might be an extinction of human species. I don't think so. And if it would happen, it would happen in a very long time, But how countries and regions of the world have the idea that there should be an optimum population level, that there should be a certain level of population that would allow them to function, and how these countries are going to reach it. So this is one question that one may ask, and especially in this different regional perspective where we can see that this is going to happen at different levels. So basically between now and 2100, most of the increase in population in the world will be in sub-Saharan Africa. Actually, about 3/4 of the increase in population growth in the next 75 years will be in sub-Saharan Africa. Sorry?
Dr. Anne, it is going to substantially transform world politics as well, because 2 billion population is going to be more in sub-Saharan Africa, but the rest of the world is going to decrease.
Yes, so mostly like what we can see here on this graph is that in most region, and especially the case of Eastern and Southeastern Asia, so like of China, India, and so on, there will be a population decline, whereas some are projected to have some more stable population. So this is what I was saying about uneven population structures. So countries are at different stage of the demographic transition. So you have Italy, which is really shrinking and aging very fast. You are Turkey, where you can see already, I mean, you can see that this there is like clearly a large population in the young ages still, but you can see already that the pyramid is shrinking at the bottom. And countries in sub-Saharan Africa, I took the example of Niger because I worked there for a while, where the population, you really have still this age pyramid, which we classical age pyramid with a very large young population. And how this will change into the future, this is shown here for 2100 according to different probabilistic scenario. You can see that there's a lot of uncertainty of how the population in the future would look like. But for instance, for Turkey, you can see that there's a high chance that there would be a decline and a lower population if things continue as we think they would. And this has, of course, importance for the labor forces, and we see that there will be a shrinking in the labor force in the EU, for instance, where it will decrease by 47 million by 2100. And for some countries, it will be quite dramatic. For instance, China, and of course, for Chinese numbers are big. I don't have a number for Turkey, but I suppose, according to this projection, the number for Turkey would be also very high. Some countries are projected to still attract populations. For instance, the case of the United States. Of course, this is one scenario. And then, as I said, the working age population in sub-Saharan Africa would increase dramatically. It could quadruple to actually 1 billion by 2100.
Turkey has also high-level migration from the Middle Eastern countries as well. Yeah, which also supports the working labor population in Turkey.
Yeah, true. So, I mean, one thing about labor force participation, overall, it has decreased basically mostly because education has increased, and therefore people start their education, their entry into the labor force later, and usually as well retirement age has been declining if we go in the long term in the historical past, and with higher life expectancy. So there's somehow slow increase in labor force participation. And what we notice also, and this is also something a capital that could be interesting to tap into, is the women's labor force participation rates is way below that of men. And in Turkey, it's especially, I mean, it's not especially, but it's also very much the case where, according to the statistics, and maybe you have better statistics, there's almost a 50% point difference between the participation rate of women and that of men.
Yeah, you're right.
There are increasing implications on society of aging. it has a lot of weight pressure on the public sector, public expenditure. This graph is showing how life expectancy has increased in some countries, and I guess Turkey is one of these countries. And compare it put it in relation with the health expenditure, and you can see, like, with increase in life expectancy, there has been also an increase in health expenditure. The interesting case is that of the US, where health expenditures have increased the most, but with way less increase in life expectancy. Because they have other issues. So of course this has quite some impact on the dependency ratio. This is the case of Japan, where in 1990 there was 5.8 a working age population for one elderly person over the age of 65, and in 2025 it's the ratio is two working age people for one elderly, and this is the case is happening everywhere. So I mean, what we look at in the work we do is how we can mitigate some of these effects. And one important area where we focus is that of human capital education, and what would be the impact on demography, as it, of course, it decreases fertility in high fertility countries, but it also supports a healthy lifestyle. It increases productivity, it reduces mortality, it has an impact on the adaptive capacity of societies and on the behavior of individuals and societies. And there's one area where it's particularly key, is that in the labor force participation that I was talking about before. And we did some work where we looked at some scenarios where we would imagine that the labor force participation of women would match that of men in different settings. I don't have time to go into these different scenario, but we show by doing that the labor force dependency ratio in the European Union, this is only about the European Union, would not increase so dramatically as if we would consider applying the same labor force participation ratio of women to of women separately of men. So this is what is happening here. As I said, education has a huge impact on fertility rates by education. Of course, the impact of education on fertility declines as fertility declines itself. So, but we can see, for instance, Turkey is an example where you have low fertility, and this is a bit older than, I don't remember when was the demographic and health survey for Turkey, but it's not very, very recent, but since 2010, but where like women with low education, no education actually had more than twice the number of children compared to women with a secondary or higher education.
But interestingly, Dr. Ryan, in Turkish case, the woman who has more education has also more birth rate. It's quite interesting in Turkish case.
So it's a recent information or a recent trend. I mean, we've seen this in some countries also, in the north, where of course then having more education means also having sometimes a higher economic status, and then have the possibility also to have
And the type
personal
of jobs also.
type of jobs also that allows you to work part-time, or definitely it is also, so that's why also like increasing labor force females education, labor force participation of women is not necessarily a deterrent to to
Absolutely.
increase
And in
birth rate.
Turkish case, in labor force, most of the women are who has any education in blue collar jobs. In fact, they are working in factories and the different kind of jobs, so which also influence and shape these kind of difference.
Yeah, no, that's very valid. And also the impact of education on the mortality rate of children born to mothers with different levels of education is also quite important. In Turkey, it's not that important, but in some countries, it's rather key. So for all these reasons, we think education is an important, and we also look at it in the context of climate change and how adaptation and resilience of people to climate change, to disaster, increases with levels of education. And the good news is that the 20th century was actually the century of education growth, and we've seen like extremely increase in levels of education, so that in the world in 1950 about half of the population had no education, whereas in 2020 this share declined to 12%, and a large majority of the population nowadays has at least a lower secondary education. And similarly, the increase for Turkey was quite impressive as well. Whereas in 1950, a good half of the population had no education, and now there's a really a huge increase. So education can also, I mean, we always say education, like population, has a momentum, but it can also happen quite fast. I'm going to skip this thing. And then, yeah, so based on that, at IASA, the Wittgenstein Center, we do population projections by levels of educational attainment. We follow some scenarios that we call the shared socioeconomic pathways, and I will say a few words about that later. We've had like so far 3 rounds of projections. The last round was published in 2023. It's available online, and one of the major characteristics and what distinguishes us from other projection producer is that first of all, we include education within the projection itself. We have 6 levels of education, and for some countries, for 50 countries, we have some 8 levels of education as well, disaggregating the post-secondary education. And also the other thing that we do is that we use expert opinion for thinking about the future and what would be the trajectories of the different countries concerning fertility, mortality, and migration. This is all.
Sorry interruption, Dr.
Yeah, sure.
So it is the last 5 minutes, then we can also receive the questions from our
Okay, so I'll
participants.
go. Okay, I'm sorry. I'll jump to that. These are the different scenarios that we use, and they are actually grounded into climate change research. So it's taking different the world taking different roads, especially depending on climate change, what climate change brings in terms of challenges and mitigation. So we have different assumptions, and I'm gonna go very fast and show you. So what are these differences? What does this bring in terms of differences for the world? So this is showing actually our projections, the different rounds that we did according to the medium scenario. And what we see, for instance, is that at each round, we projected the population of the world to peak at a later stage and to be higher. And this is a reason based in the Bayesian period, where actually what we didn't foresee that the mortality would decline faster in the global south This was due to the spread of immunization, international actions toward increasing the health status of population in the global south, and also a decline. The decline in fertility was not as strong as what we expected. Some have projections that are a bit higher, but here you see the different peaks. I'm going to go fast. So this is the world in 2020. So still quite a pyramid, still quite segments of the population that is low educated, and this is the population in 2100 with about 10 billion people, and where we foresee that there will be a huge increase in education. Not meaning that this is already done deal, meaning that there's still needs a lot of investment to reach that point. And the world according to different scenarios. Here we have the result for all countries, and you can see on the bottom left, this is Turkey in 2020, and this is Turkey in 2100. And just to give you a small look into what would be the future according to our projections for Turkey, here we have two different set of scenario. So in the fast increasing scenario, you have a population which reach about 120 million by the end of the century, and in all the other scenario, we would have a decline by the middle of the century, and going to something like between 80 and 90 billion. And having the role of education, and this is not for Turkey, but this is for the region of Western Asia where Turkey is located, then depending on the scenario where you have fast increase in education or low increase in education, then leads to different results. And then, I mean, we did, I go back. So we did an expert survey where we asked experts in the field of demography what they were thinking about what would be the future of fertility, mortality, migration, and so on. And this is would be helpful for the next round of projections. And mostly what the experts, the demographic experts, tend to think that fertility is not going to increase into the future, that it's going to go according to the demographic transition, and that this level of low fertility that we see at present in the global north is going to be more and more present all over the world. Foresee still life expectancy increases, more emigration from Africa, Asia, Latin American countries, and more immigration rates into Europe. And another interesting part is that thinking that the future demographic challenges may not have demographic solutions, meaning, for instance, that if we think that of low fertility being a challenge, then maybe it's not increasing fertility might be a difficult thing, but maybe we need to find solutions to cope with low fertility rates. And this is, I think this is the big question for the future, at least in my field in demography, is how is the world is going to develop, and it's especially relevant for fertility. And at the moment, there is a bit a lack of theory about how this could evolve. And we are reaching a point where we go into unknown territories. And just to conclude, and this is my final slide, and this is a bit totally off topic, but it's an advertisement for a program that we have at IASA, which is called the Young Scientist Summer Program. And we welcome for 3 months PhD students, usually in their second year, who come. They are paid by the program, and they can stay for 3 months and be integrated into the team. It starts in June, finishes in August. Unfortunately, this is not relevant for this year. The next call will open in October 2025, and selection process is in January of next year. I will
Thank you
stop
for the
here.
presentation.
Thank you. Sorry
Dr.
for
Anne,
being for being so long.
in our conversation section, we have a couple of questions and comments. And both of the questions and comments are about the economy, the relationship between economy and birth rate. So can you also summarize the relationship between economic development, welfare, and birth rate? So the basic perception in Turkey, if you have better economic conditions, you have more birth rate. What do you think about that?
It's very difficult to generalize, I would say, because we've seen, I mean, definitely if the economy is not doing well, then definitely this has a declining impact on the fertility. That's for sure. But whether when the economy is good, there is an increase in fertility is not so obvious, and obviously it's not, because why is the economy good? Maybe the economy good is the economy is doing well because there's a lot of work, and people are all working in urban centers where, as I said before, where like the lodging is expensive, and this has more tendency to reduce the size of family. Maybe education is becoming expensive. People want to put their children in private schools, in private universities, cost of money. Then you don't want to have many children in that case. So it's also a question of how, so welfare, the welfare of welfare benefits that will be distributed to the people. So I don't think it's not only a question of the economy doing well, it's also how the welfare is distributed within the society.
Yeah, in our research as well, in Turkish case, there isn't directly relation between the economic welfare and the increasing of the birth rate. And the most significant one, as you mentioned, the perception of the kids right now. They just want to, like, the value of the kids has increased a lot in Turkey. It also shapes the understanding of the birth rate. And we have another question by Professor Mehmet Fatih Aysan. He's professor in Marmara University. And for a long time, it was argued that social policies prevented the rapid decline in fertility. However, the recent decline in fertility rates in Scandinavian countries show that social policies are not sufficient. What are your thoughts on the relationship between social policies and fertility rates and fertility?
Yeah, very true. I mean, social policies are not enough, as we see, yeah, everywhere. So I'm French, and in France as well, like, as a long history of social policy supporting families, providing kindergarten, providing infrastructure to put the children and benefits for the families and so on. And still, with all this, fertility has started declining. So there are, I mean, you cannot pin it to one factor that would be responsible for this. There are many things, but I also think that there is a moment in history where the future is a bit uncertain, and there's a lot in, especially if you talk to young people. I think the youth generation is anxious about the future, looking at the economy, looking at climate change, the state of the world, the geopolitical state of the world, and this is not an environment that is conducive to high fertility. So beside, and then you can really implement many social policies, and we see this happening. I mean, in Nordic countries, but also even like the countries like Hungary, where really the government, the family ministry is pushing for. I mean, they are a bit successful, but not. I guess not to the point that they expected. And we see this also in South Korea, in Japan, where really the government is trying to push for increasing birth rates, but it's very difficult. So you really have to adapt the society so that that children are compatible also with the way people want to live, and this is not easy.
Thank you. And also our participants can ask their questions in Turkish in the conversation side, and I can translate it. So, and I have one question as well, Dr. Anne. So based on your research, the birth rate is quite different in the different parts of the world. So in sub-Saharan African, right now birth rate is incredibly high in comparing with the other parts of the world. And also birth rate basically shapes the demography, the uneven structure of the demography in Europe, in Turkey, in many places. So I want to listen your perspective about the global dynamics of this birth rate and transformation of demography, how it is going to shape the relationship between countries, and also the global dynamics of these kind of relations. It's very much general, I know, but
Yeah, you put my my science to test. Yeah, so you're right. So obviously there are different fertility rates in the world, and for Africa, in some countries in Africa, it's still above 7 children per woman at the moment. So definitely these population are increasing, but somehow as well, what we see, I mean, that's what I was trying to show with this demographic transition. So it's not, they're not exceptions. So they are on the same trajectory as Turkey was, as France was, as other countries were. They're just the demographic transition is just happening later. So I think, and as I said, there's no exception to this demographic transition. So I believe that this will happen also in these parts of the world where fertility is still very high. Still, it will reshape the the weight of the different regions of the world in yeah, quite dramatically. So as we said, by in 2100, the size of sub-Saharan Africa, the weight of sub-Saharan Africa will be much bigger, more than 1/3 of the whole world, compared to other parts of other regions of the world. So this will not be without consequences, and there I mean, it's difficult to imagine. It depends how is the development in Africa. So if we think that the fertility will decline in Africa, it means also that education will have increased. There will be a different economic trajectory for the region. But yeah, as I said, I don't have a crystal ball, so what I can see about the future of population doesn't mean that I have a vision about the future of the economy, of the geopolitical situation, and so on.
yeah. And we have two questions more. And I want to also ask again the Professor Mehmet Aysan's question, which is quite relevant to my also, which I'm very much curious about these questions. Basically, he says that, are the economic implications of population aging being overstated? Could advancement in AI and technology mitigate the economic risk associated with aging populations? Should greater attention be directed towards addressing the rising inequalities in this context? And also recently I read one report from the Carnegie, which is about how Japanese technology is going to help this problem. And even this aging problem is going to also contribute Japanese economy, because they are right now experiencing this aging problem. and who has some technologies and trying to deal with these problems, which can be exported to other parts of the world. So what do you think about these kind of questions and new dynamics?
Yeah, I'm not a pessimistic person, so I'm also think that we a bit we exaggerate a bit this challenge about aging. As I said, I mean, there are, like, in terms of dependency ratios, there are many things that can be done, like raising the labor force participation of women, increasing education is going to help. There is okay, also, since we live longer, so if we think of life expectancy increase to ages above 90 years for most countries in the world, then for sure people will have to work longer. I mean, this is at the moment is a bit difficult. Again, I'm from France. You know what is happening there when we talk about increasing age at retirement. But I think this is something that will need to be put in place. Maybe also changing the norms, how people work. So if you also think of, like, planning children within the work life and having a work-life balance that allows to work longer, but having periods where maybe you don't work because you have children. So there's the things that can be done. And the role of AI, I absolutely agree. I think we haven't started to grasp how much this artificial intelligence is going to help, and it's going to help to take care of elderly people. It's going to help also in making sure that we have productivity in later ages. So I definitely think that's a big help, and I also agree that nowadays really an important issue is the inequalities in our societies. So we really have split societies, and where not everyone has access to all the benefits of a good education, of having access to all the welfare, of where the wealth is not distributed equally among the people. I mean, it's at the country level, between countries, but it's also intra-countries. I think this is also something.
Doctor, and I'm also very much curious about your perspective about the state's role in this process, birth rate process, because in Turkey, what state has always been involved in this policymaking process, pronatalist policies, antinatalist policies, and right now state also directly is sponsoring, supporting birth rate in Turkey. Do you think, is it going to be game changer? Because in Europe, it was like a natural process, which takes 100 years. But in Turkey, last just like a 30, 40 years, birth rate declined shrinkly and incredibly. So maybe state can also play very much positively in comparing with the European countries. What do you think about that?
Mm, I I don't know. I mean, I cannot say anything about Turkey, but I see from the experience what has happened, what is happening in the other countries, that the state has not been, I mean, the government policies, incentive that are put so that people think that they can have more children, are not very successful. So it's so I think what we see is more a change of norms. So the norms in the societies have changed, and these are things that are very difficult to change with policy. So that's where I would be a bit doubtful. I agree with your point that it's a totally different way of thinking, like countries where the system has been developed in a long period, and where, like, these family policies have been long in place, and so on, to a country. But yeah, it's very, I mean, we see this. I mean, the extreme example is that of China, where we went from a one-child policy to 2 children policy, and then now opening to as many children. And there it doesn't work, because like the norms, actually the norms have changed in the meantime, and this is very difficult to change differently. Of course, I mean, the years will tell whether I'm right or not, and maybe at one point the norms will be having more children again. But it seems I'm not sure the policy can greatly influence that. I think it can influence at the margin. I don't say, but there are the other parameters, like the anxiety of people, the investment in children, where there would be people feel like they cannot invest in many children, but in a few. I think this is more difficult to change.
I think the last question is quite relevant to the last point, because Zümrüt Hanım also asked about the recent global political dynamics, like a great power competition, wars, migration, the problems. So how this process also affects influence birth rate worldwide?
Yeah, it's also, I mean, it is contributing to, I think it is contributing to the decline in fertility in, let's say, the global north. And yeah, I think it plays definitely it plays a role. So this, I mean, when we did this survey to the demographic expert, I mean, this one clear answer where people saw like this instability. I mean, instability in any sense, whether it's economic, environmental, societal, geopolitical, is not conducive to a stable population, to fertility. So I think that's where, I mean, the only time where we see fertility increase, but it's more in high fertility societies where there might be a need for more people to work, like, let's say, in a rural context, in the farm. So you would maybe increase the number, the fertility. But otherwise, most of the time, I think like this instability, this crisis, are definitely not conducive to high fertility.
Thank you, Dr. Anne. Thank you for your presentation and contribution and answer our questions. And have a good night.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention. Thank you. Have a good evening too. Bye.